This interview is for Lanka-Surrey. Today I'm here with the Honorable MP Garnett Genius of Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, from the Conservative Party. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. You're also the Deputy Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, and we just have a few questions on regard to this current situation that's happening in Sri Lanka. Last Friday, the Sri Lankan president appointed his predecessor, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, as Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. A move that has been described as undemocratically and unconstitutional. The Rajapaksa regime has been accused of war crimes against humanity and genocide against Tamil people. What is your take on the current situation in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think you've highlighted the issues very well in that question. The attempted return of the Rajapaksa regime, and I apologize for my pronunciation, but the apparent return of that regime raises concerns in terms of the process, the undemocratic way in which this is proceeding, but also, of course, the history of that regime in terms of the terrible abuses of human rights that happened at the end of the Civil War. The progress in terms of justice and reconciliation has been very slow in Sri Lanka, and now there's the appearance that we're moving in the opposite direction. So it's important for parliamentarians like myself, from Canada, from countries around the world, to be engaged with these issues, to be advocating for human rights, to be seeking meaningful measures of accountability. If we do not take these kinds of major violations of human rights seriously, if we don't ensure that people that are responsible for perpetrating these crimes are held accountable, then that's a message that's received by other regimes around the world that are then more likely to think that they can get away with similar violations of human rights. What we need to see from the Canadian government is the use of targeted sanctions, the Magnitsky Act that was proposed by Conservatives and passed by this Parliament. The Magnitsky Act, I think, should be used to sanction officials in Sri Lanka responsible for major violations of human rights. And it's important for the government, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, to speak clearly and forcefully about what is certainly a very worrying direction that the country seems to be taking.
So, the Conservative government led by former Prime Minister Harper had a firm approach to government relations between Canada and Sri Lanka. In your opinion, is the current Liberal government doing enough on the Sri Lankan file?
The previous Conservative government championed a principled foreign policy, which means standing up for our values on the world stage and recognizing that those values, freedom, democracy, human rights, the rule of law, aren't just Canadian values, they are universal human values. And that includes, in a particular way, standing up for the rights of minorities who may be vulnerable to generalized violence or to organized oppression by the state. In the case of Sri Lanka, Canada, under the Conservatives, was really emphasizing the need for justice, reconciliation, and protection of the rights of minorities. And that's why, under Stephen Harper, we took a firm stand in boycotting the Commonwealth Summit that took place in Colombo. Under this government, certainly during the election, many promises were made about Sri Lanka, but we have not seen meaningful action at all. In fact, the action we've seen has been moving in the wrong direction. That is the cancellation of the Office of Religious Freedom. The Office of Religious Freedom had an important and effective project in Sri Lanka, helping to address kind of the long-term issues of reconciliation. Canada can be engaged not just in speaking in a public way about these human rights issues, but also helping to support programs that facilitate understanding. I know when I've talked to people in the Tamil community in Canada, they've highlighted issues in the education system, the importance of having an education system in Sri Lanka that is pro-pluralism, that encourages people to see the dignity that exists in their fellows who may be part of other communities. So these are other areas of possible Canadian engagement, but we haven't seen that clear public engagement. We haven't seen those firm stands, and we also have not seen the kinds of investments in infrastructure that facilitates justice and reconciliation. So I think we can do a lot better on this.
Successive Sri Lankan governments have taken international governments for granted on the topic of human rights violations and war crime accusations against Sri Lanka. What can Canada do to rein on the Sri Lankan government?
Well, I think there have to be consequences for grievous violations of human rights. We need to speak about them, but we can't just speak about them. The message needs to be sent that if somebody's involved in genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes, that there will be consequences in terms of that person's ability to move their money, to travel, to enjoy the benefits of a globalized world. And that is the genius behind something called the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act, named for Sergei Magnitsky, who was a lawyer in Russia who was killed. The idea behind the Magnitsky Act is that we can use sanctions, but not generalized sanctions that affect the people to some extent, but targeted sanctions that target individual violators of human rights and prevent them from having that opportunity to travel, to move their money to the West. In regimes that are frequent violators of human rights, often people that are involved in those regimes are looking for the escape hatch. They want to be able to have some degree of assurance that if things go south, they can get out. But the Magnitsky Act is a way of saying to them, you better be careful what you do, because if you cross certain lines, you will not have that option anymore. This is something that Conservatives have championed in Parliament. It was a bill put forward by a Conservative senator that was then advanced in the House of Commons, and we were able to pass the Magnitsky sanctions in this Parliament, so we now have a Magnitsky Act in Canada. But its effectiveness depends on it being used, and thus far we have not seen the Magnitsky Act used to sanction officials in Sri Lanka involved in human rights violations. There are other cases such as Iran where I think there's been a strange unwillingness to use the Magnitsky Act. It's great that we've passed the law, but now we need to actually use the law in the way that it was intended.
The Sri Lankan Prime Minister himself has publicly stated that the President has made decisions against the Constitution. The minority Tamils in Sri Lanka have had the same concern. How can the Tamils expect any political solution under a Sri Lankan Constitution?
Well, the abuses we've seen in process are very significant, and I think Western governments need to seize this moment to push back to ensure that there is meaningful rule of law. There are big concerns now about the direction things are going, and that requires our engagement. And I'll just add as well that this is a concern not only for the Tamils or for other minority ethnic or faith communities. This is really a question about the state of democracy and a rule of law for the whole country. Having a firm, effective system of rule of law isn't just about minorities. It benefits everybody. It ensures everybody's rights are well protected.
So at this point in time, with the unrest in Sri Lanka, would you want to share your message to the Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora on behalf of the Conservative government?
Well, I've been very impressed always by the level of engagement in politics that we've seen from the Tamil community and the commitment that the community has here in Canada to advancing human rights and to having solidarity with those who are suffering in Sri Lanka and around the world. You haven't just forgotten about the challenges back home since coming to Canada. You've been engaged in a way that is a real tribute to your community and to this country. And I would encourage all of you to continue to be engaged in the public discussion around this issue, talking to your MPs, educating us about the situation, and encouraging a stronger response. Canada can be a global leader on human rights. We can use our voice to speak into these situations in favor of fundamental rights, minority rights, recognition of the opportunity that comes through peaceful pluralism, similar to what we have in Canada. I believe that the living well together we have here in Canada is possible anywhere, but it requires us as a country to be engaged in fearlessly, boldly promoting fundamental human rights. And that means sometimes investing in programming that help move us in that direction. Sometimes that means speaking out in a critical way. Sometimes that means using strong tools like Magnitsky sanctions to respond. And these are all part of the toolkit that we can use. And our hope as a party is that we can return Canada to a place of that principled foreign policy, where we are standing up for Canadian and universal human values on the world stage, in particular for democracy and human rights. And again, thank you to all of those who are engaged with these issues on an ongoing basis, helping us to be aware, helping other parliamentarians to be aware, and it's now critically important that we respond.
On that note, thank you for your time at the Garnett Genius, and thanks for shedding light on the current situation in Sri Lanka. Thank you.